this is intended to be the trailer, not the sort of main event, as it were. I just wanted to update you primarily about what we've been doing as a membership committee to give effect to the club's strategic intent, and tell you a little bit about the key actions we've got planned for this year. It's going to be a bit of a double act, because at the end of this I'm going to hand over to Yusuf to talk a little bit about how we're going to measure progress, and in particular what we've been doing and how it might apply to some of the other club committees. So here we go. In respect of the club vision, what we're trying to do is give effect to this, and we're proposing essentially giving effect to the intent to be a strong, active, dynamic, and to make a contribution, to be an influence for good, by setting ourselves the vision to grow the club to 221 members by 2021. Now, there is some method in this madness, if you like. The idea in growing the size of the club is twofold. One is about financial sustainability. We sit, Tony, at around about 160 members, and we're barely financially sustainable with that number. And so the idea is that certainly by growing the size of the club, we become far more financially sustainable. But the other part of this is about growing the diversity of the club, so we more reflect, I suppose, the community of which we are part and want to influence. And the idea here, if we can increase the diversity of the club in terms of vocations, age, and gender and so on, is that we can achieve that by growing the club and adding new members that reflect that mix that we want in the club. And to that end, what we've been talking about is setting essentially 5 particular goals to give effect to that vision over the 7 years to 2021. I'll just quickly rattle through these. The idea here is firstly to make sure that as we think about growing the club and recruitment into the club, we adopt an approach which is sort of much more business-like, much more akin to what all of us probably do in our professional life, is having set ourselves a vision for the club, how we want to proceed, then to think much more crisply, much more deliberately about the sort of people that we need in the club to achieve our overall strategic intent. And first and foremost there, of course, is to ensure that we're recruiting into the club people who are willing to put in the service above self to achieve our goals in our community. The second is to, if we're going to grow the club to 221, is to essentially establish the target of growing the club by at least 10 members every year. And there is a little bit of a wrinkle in that target, I have to say, because it was mentioned earlier, of course, we every year have a number of resignations. And if we assume that in the club, the size we are, we have somewhere around 20 resignations a year, say on average, what that is saying we're needing to look at recruiting around 30 new members into the club each year over each of the next 7 years. That's a big challenge. The third goal there is about reducing the average age of the club. I think we currently sit with an average age around 60. Nothing wrong with having a club with older members, but the idea here nonetheless is that if we want to target and think about how we are influential in our community, we may well want to sort of bring in people who are either emerging as leaders or in key leadership roles in the community. And one of the ways in which that may be achieved is by consciously thinking about some younger members being drawn into the club. And again, can be achieved if we think about that as a deliberate part of our recruitment strategy as we increase the size of the club. More broadly, I suppose, as we think about diversity, it's about thinking about people in the community and roles or in vocations in the Wellington area that can help the club have a greater impact. And I think a number of you know there are various sort of parts of the business community in particular who aren't really currently represented in the membership of the club. I think, Tony, I know again you've got a particular interest in how we might target some of those technology companies in the region, and those are really actively led by younger people. We were talking over lunch at the back table about the potential to have greater representation from a number of professional services organisations in the region. So we want to think about how we might target those sorts of people and bring them into the club. And then, of course, there are a broader goal also about increasing diversity, so it just does reflect not just the business community, but the wider community of which we are part and which we serve. Now, the key thing for me around this is recognising that membership and membership recruitment is not just the responsibility of the membership committee, it's actually a responsibility that all members of the club have. What we in the membership committee are trying to do is to set this up in a way that gives everyone in the club some clarity about what we're trying to target and the way in which we might go about recruiting people into the club. So we're having a bit of a rethink about some of the things that might support membership recruitment, and those are some of the key actions that we're looking at over the next few months. The first action in our action plan is to look at potentially a different way of setting up each year a process where as a club we might think much more actively about who do we want to target in the community and who's going to do that for us and what are the tactics we might employ in the same way that you would do if you were trying to recruit people into your business. And so we're going to have a think about ways of implementing a process in which all members are engaged and thinking about who we want to bring in and what are the resources we might provide and assistance we might provide to members to carry that task out. The second key action is around updating some of the guidance material. There is some material on our website, but I think some of that is reasonably dated. So we're looking at updating some of the guidance and related material we might have for all of us to use. And the third action really is the ongoing role of the membership committee, which is to support the club as a whole in how we manage both that overall recruitment process, but once we've got to the point of having someone nominated to be a member, to facilitate that process of them being approved and inducted into the club. So that's just a little bit of a taste of what we're thinking about as a membership committee. It's really a sort of major refresh, as it were, of how we think about recruitment, how we might take the club forward in terms of membership. What I'll do now is just hand over to Yusuf to take you through how we might look at measuring this and use other committees to do the same sort of thing.
Thanks, Martin. On behalf of Tony and the board, I worked with Martin to help facilitate this process. And some of you may remember that towards the end of last year, we've released this, which you'll hear more about later. But that's the final board-approved strategic intent for between now and 2021. But it requires a bit more material. In other words, it needs sub-strategies. So working with Martin has been hopefully a template for how I might work with each of the committees to develop these sub-strategies that support the overall strategy, if that makes sense. And I'm going to show you a slide which might have a mixed reaction. Right, so ultimately the plan is that at a frequency yet to be agreed, that somebody from the committee or myself might get up and actually give feedback to the club on how we're performing against those targets. Now, there's two ways to look at it. One is that this is going to kill the magic, or this is going to preserve the magic. I hope you fall on the side of preserving the magic, because there is a magic in the club. But anybody who knows anything about magicians knows that magic just doesn't happen by chance. Magic involves, a lot of beneath the covers, behind the scenes work to achieve what looks like magic. So I'm hoping that you accept that that we need to, in a way, introduce just the right level of rigour without it becoming rigor mortis and killing the club's enthusiasm. So this is all example data, so nobody's to read anything into the data, but the process would look something like that, where every quarter, every month, something probably quarterly, we'll just establish what our intent was for that quarter, for the year, and then just track how we're going. And that's part of the philosophy behind I guess moving away from some people's perceptions that this is just a lunch club. Well, actually, I think we'd all agree that we need some sort of way of measuring our progress and focusing our minds on where we're performing and where we might need to put a bit more effort in.